Good morning. It's Tuesday, September 3rd. And yesterday in Israel, there was a general strike that took place in order to pressure Netanyahu to secure the return of hostages in Gaza. We all know what happened to the last 6 hostages that were returned when they were returned dead. And so the pressure is heavily on Netanyahu to get his act together and stop ignoring the situation and pretending that the border between Israel and Egypt is more important than getting the release of these hostages. It's a ridiculous situation. Netanyahu is under severe personal pressure because if he gives up some of these situations and ends up being ousted from office, he'll be going to jail for previous criminal activities. So we have a man who's in charge of a country that is in a desperate situation, who is taking his personal life into account ahead of the lives of the citizens of Israel and the captives that Hamas has held. Now, I personally don't believe that many of these hostages will survive. They've been under Hamas control far too long, and I don't believe that Hamas has any thoughts about keeping these prisoners alive and healthy. That is not part of their makeup. So yesterday there were work stoppages in Israel. The nation is pissed off. The public is in a downward spiral. They are tired of receiving body bags. And Netanyahu is not facing up to that fact that he has to step forward and get this thing straightened out in spite of the fact that he's going to go to jail. He can't keep putting his personal life ahead of the lives of the hostages and the attitudes of the people in the country of Israel. And so Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion International Airport halted departures and arrivals for flights for over 2 hours, starting at 8 a.m. local time. And that was the largest in Israel since March of 2023, when a similar mass walkout over Netanyahu's controversial attempts to overhaul the country's judiciary brought much of the country to a standstill. So I don't know how Netanyahu continues to survive with the actions that he takes that are not in the best interests of Israel, but only in the best interests of he himself. Now, there are more than 100 hostages, including 35 that are believed to be dead, that are still being held in Gaza. And the vast majority of those hostages were taken during Hamas's October 7 attack on Israel. And that was when 1,200 people were killed and more than 200 were taken captive. And on Sunday in Israel, thousands of Israelis took to the streets in many cities in one of the biggest nationwide protests since the outbreak of the war on Hamas. And many of these protesters returned to the streets in various locations around Israel on Monday morning when they blocked many major avenues on the cities like Tel Aviv. So right now, myself and everybody else out there who's watching this thing can't really figure out how the whole thing is liable to end. And in Jerusalem, the protesters called for Netanyahu to resign, while the cabinet had a meeting on Sunday, and the prime minister, the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, lambasted the Israeli government for what he said was prioritizing control over the key border crossing known as the Philadelphia Corridor over a deal to free hostages. He called that a moral disgrace. So you have splits within the cabinet over the conduct of the war, which has becoming an increasingly public and rancorous event during these recent months. And this has just shown the many deep divisions at the top of the Israeli government. And many American officials describe a new urgency in attempting to reach a ceasefire for hostages deal. And the U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said, while meeting the families of Americans held hostages, that the next few days would be critical in a push to free those still held by Hamas. And they'll push hard to get those hostages back. But I feel that many of those hostages are not alive. They've been there too long. This is a dicey, nasty situation. And if anybody really believes that any of these hostages are going to come back alive, that's just wishful thinking. In my mind, even if they're now alive, at the time they get ready to release them, they will probably be killed. So there's an ugly situation, a totally ugly situation, horrible, and the world stands by and watches it. And we feel with our hands tied behind our backs that we can't do enough to help, but it doesn't seem to matter. And Netanyahu refuses to bend because he is protecting his life. So I leave you with that. Disgusted this morning. Have a great day. Bye.